Hey guys, hope you're having a great day. A Senate hearing happened today that I think is worth your attention. There were many familiar faces testifying on the topic of returning Americans to work and to school. And you'll know these names. Dr. Anthony Fauci, who heads up infectious diseases at the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Hahn, who heads up the FDA, Dr. Redfield, the head of the CDC, and Admiral Garrar, who is basically the head of testing, COVID-19 testing in the Department of Health and Human Services. He's also a pediatrician. Like most hearings, there were plenty of politics at play, with Democrats and Republicans disagreeing about the Trump administration's response to COVID-19. That said, there seemed to be a shared priority by all on the importance of testing, and especially as we get to the back half of the year. Remember, we want more tests because that means more information. The better the information, the hopefully better the policies that we can put in place to at least keep each other safe and healthy. That said, one of the most important exchanges in the hearing was about returning students to school. Remember, this is important not just for parents and their children, but for the economy overall and for society. Here's Dr. Fauci setting some expectations.
The idea of having treatments available or a vaccine to facilitate the reentry of students into the fall term would be something that would be a bit of a bridge too far. But we're really not talking about necessarily treating a student who gets ill, but how the student will feel safe in going back to school. If this were a situation where we had a vaccine, that would really be the end of that issue in a positive way. But as I mentioned in my opening remarks, even at the top speed we're going, we don't see a vaccine playing in the ability of individuals to get back to school this term. What they really want is to know if they are safe. And that's the question that'll have to be due with what we discussed earlier about testing.
Now, later in the hearing, Senator Rand Paul challenged whether or not American kids should have been kept out of school at all. Senator Paul is an eye surgeon. He himself recovered from COVID-19. And I want you to listen to this exchange because Senator Paul and Dr. Fauci both represent two different sides to this argument.
I mean, shouldn't we at least be discussing what the mortality of children is? This is for Dr. Fauci as well. You know, the mortality between 0 and 18 in the New York data approaches 0. It's not going to be absolutely 0, but it almost approaches 0. Between 18 and 45, the mortality in New York was 10 out of 100,000. It's not to say this isn't deadly, but really outside of New England, we've had a relatively benign course for this virus nationwide. And I think the one-size-fits-all that we're going to have a national strategy and nobody's going to go to school is kind of ridiculous. We really ought to be doing it school district by school district, and the power needs to be dispersed because people make wrong predictions. And really the history of this, when we look back, will be of wrong prediction after wrong prediction after wrong prediction, starting with Ferguson in England. So I think we ought to have a little bit of humility in our belief that we know what's best for the economy. But if we keep kids out of school for another year, what's going to happen is the poor and underprivileged kids who don't have a parent that's able to teach them at home are not going to learn for a full year. And I think we ought to look at the Swedish model, and we ought to look at letting our kids get back to school. I think it's a huge mistake if we don't open the schools in the fall.
Is that you use the word we should be humble about what we don't know. And I think that falls under the fact that we don't know everything about this virus. And we really better be very careful, particularly when it comes to children. Because the more and more we learn, we're seeing things about what this virus can do that we didn't see from the studies in China or in Europe. For example, right now, children presenting with COVID-19 who actually have a very strange inflammatory syndrome, very similar to Kawasaki's syndrome. I think we better be careful if we are not cavalier in thinking that children are completely immune to the deleterious effects. So again, you're right in the numbers that children in general do much, much better than adults and the elderly, and particularly those with underlying conditions. But I am very careful and hopefully humble in knowing that I don't know everything about this disease, and that's why I'm very reserved in making broad predictions.
So this is definitely a story to watch. What came up during the hearing was a discussion about testing strategies for different schools, whether or not, for example, a certain group of students would be tested before they're allowed to return to school, whether or not that would happen in different regions. And here's the bottom line coming from health officials. We can plan, we can prepare. but a lot of what we do will depend upon the dynamic of the pandemic at the time. So for now, it's really wait and see. Questions, comments, let me know. And as always, more on smarternews.com.